my name's Sam. Welcome to my channel. So today I wanted to do an if you like this, maybe you will like this recommendation video. So when my friends ask me for book recommendations, I always want to know what other genres or what other books they've liked, so I'm not recommending them something totally out of their comfort zone. So these books might be similar in plot or characters, or just simply the tone of them felt similar to me, and I think that if you like one, you might like the other. So first I have one of my all-time favorite books, and a book that I'd say is quite popular, and that is If You Liked Nothing to See Here by Kevin Wilson. I think you might like Early Morning Riser by Katherine Heine. So Nothing to See Here is about two friends, Madison and Lillian, and Madison has her life together a little bit more than Lillian. She's successful, she's married to a congressman or a senator or something, and she comes back into Lillian's life and she asks her to do her a favor, and that favor is to basically be a nanny of sorts to her two stepchildren that just so happen to spontaneously combust. And in Early Morning Riser, we're following a bunch of characters, mainly Jane and her relationship with Duncan, but then it also has Duncan's ex-wife Aggie and Aggie's husband Gary and their friend Jimmy. And it follows them as their lives kind of intertwine. I think if you like Nothing to See Here, you might like Early Morning Riser because of the found family. So Nothing to See Here, I'd say, is found family in more of the traditional aspect. Lillian and these two kids really become each other's family and they become really important to each other. Whereas I like to call this one reluctant found family. Like, none of these characters really like each other. They don't really want to be in each other's lives, but they kind of have to be in order to function, in order to get by. And both of these books I found very funny and heartwarming. Nothing to See Here is quite popular. Early Morning Riser has a pretty low Goodreads rating. I think it has like a 3.5, and I can see why the characters in this one are quite unlikable. So if you like found family and you don't mind unlikable characters, or you like unlikable characters, I think if you like Nothing to See Here, you would definitely like Early Morning Riser. Next, I think if you liked Less by Andrew Sean Greer, you would like Everyone in This Room Will Someday Be Dead by Emily R. Austin. In Less, we are following Arthur Less, who is a 50-year-old novelist, and he has had like a 10-year on-again, off-again relationship with his boyfriend, and now that boyfriend is getting married. He's invited to the wedding. He doesn't want to go because it's an ex-boyfriend, but he doesn't not want to go and look like he's hurt by this marriage. So instead, he accepts all these invitations to speak at literary events all over the world. So he goes to Germany, Italy, Morocco, and we're just following him as he's going around to these literary events, and we're just kind of following him and his thoughts, and it goes back into his past as well, where he had a relationship with an older man, so it kind of has the juxtaposition of his relationship with a younger guy as he's the older one, and his relationship with an older guy when he's the younger one. And it kind of felt like one of those books that's more vibes, less plot. And that felt the same to me with Everyone in This Room Will Someday Be Dead by Emily R. Austin. So in that one, we're following Gilda, and she goes to a Catholic church in her neighborhood because she's responding to a flyer for free therapy. And instead, the pastor there thinks that she's there for a job interview. And instead of just correcting him, she goes along with it, and she ends up working at this church, and she is a lesbian. So it's just following her day to day working at this church, worried that these people are going to realize that she's a lesbian. And it's another one of those low plot, mainly vibes kind of book. We're just following her as she's stumbling through life, trying to figure things out. She's anxious, she's awkward. And it reminded me of Less because I'd say in both of those, the main characters, it kind of gives off this vibe like mildly depressed. Like, they're not super sad, but they're just kind of going through life, going through the motions, figuring stuff out. Both of those also kind of remind me of the vibe of Nothing to See Here and Early Morning Riser, but instead of having a found family aspect, like where the found family comes together and helps them get through life and the struggles of life, they are helping themselves through, and they kind of figure their stuff out on their own. And they kind of have that self-realization tone where it's the main characters themselves helping themselves get through their problems and their anxieties. These next two books I'd say are similar because they were both absolutely hilarious, and they actually both remind me of the movie Rat Race, and that is Dial A for Aunties by Jesse Q. Sutanto and Swamp Story by Dave Barry. So in Dial A for Aunties, we are following Madeline and her mom and 3 aunts, and all 4 of the older women in her life they're very meddling and they interfere a lot, and she feels like she has to do what they want to make them happy, and all of them are in the wedding industry. So Madeline is a photographer, the aunties do like cakes and hair and makeup and entertainment, and the night before this big wedding that they have to do, they convince Madeline to go on a blind date, and she ends up killing the guy that she is on the blind date with, and then it's just this spiral out of control where one thing leads to this thing and this thing and this thing, and you think that they have one thing under control, and then this happens. And it was just so fun following all of these women like bumbling through trying to get rid of a dead body, and it was quite entertaining. In Swamp Story, we have more like 3 different storylines going on, and then they all kind of converge, and it's just this big kind of disaster. And I can't remember the characters' names, but we're following like a young mom and her young child who are living in like the Florida swamp with like her deadbeat boyfriend, and he's trying to get famous, like doing this kind of like swamp reality show kind of TV, like he's just figuring it out on his own, and she stumbles upon some gold. And then we're also following these 2 like bad guys that are in the swamp, and they are trying to get the gold from Jessie, I think is her name. And then we're also following these other guys trying to make this viral video. And all of it kind of converges together, all the storylines mix and mingle, and everyone is kind of after everyone, and it was just ridiculous and funny. And I think if you liked one, you might like the other, because they're both just quick reads, funny rat race kind of stories. All right, next I have another book that is more on the popular end, although I feel like it should be more popular than it is, and a book that it doesn't have very many ratings on Goodreads, and that is if you liked The Bandit Queens by Parini Shroff, I think you might like Jamila Green Ruins Everything by Zarka Nawaz. So in The Bandit Queens, we are following Geeta in this remote village in India, and one day her husband just walked out on her. He left. He disappeared. And everyone in the village thinks that she killed him. And she's like, you know what? That suits me just fine. You think I'm a murderer, whatever. Maybe you'll leave me alone. And then one day other women in the village start coming to her like, hey, you killed your husband, can you help me kill mine? And it's ultimately a story about female friendship as these women are trying to kill their husbands and get through these like situations that they've gotten themselves in. Kind of similar to Dial A for Aunties and Swamp Story, where it kind of becomes like a little bit of a rat race, but with more serious topics that are being handled. And in Jamila Green Ruins Everything, I honestly don't know really how to even describe it. We're following Jamila Green, and basically she goes to her mosque to pray because she wants to be a New York Times bestselling author. And the imam there, Ibrahim, I think is his name, says, well, I'll help you, but you have to do a good deed. So her and Ibrahim decide to help this homeless guy. And then the homeless guy ends up having gotten like recruited by this terrorist organization, and then it puts suspicions on Ibrahim, and he gets taken by the CIA, and then Jamila is like, well, I gotta help him, and it just spirals out of control from there. Her daughter gets involved, and both Jamila Green Ruins Everything and The Bandit Queens are similar because they take serious situations and they make them satirical. Jamila Green being quite a bit more outlandish than The Bandit Queens, but they were both good times. Again, they were both funny. And The Bandit Queens did something that I really enjoy in books too, and it had like running gags. Like there was certain things throughout the whole book that kept getting mentioned, kind of like in a sitcom where they have running gags throughout the whole sitcom. Okay, next I have 2 books for this one, and that is if you liked The Poet X by Elizabeth Acevedo or The Black Flamingo by Dean Atta, I think you might like Muted by Tammy Charles. So the comparison for these ones, I'd say, is pretty straightforward. They're all 3 YA books written in verse. The Poet X and The Black Flamingo are more coming-of-age stories, whereas Muted is as well, but also with, I'd say, more of a focus on the Me Too movement and grooming, and inspired by the whole R. Kelly situation, so definitely look up trigger warnings for that one. The Poet X is following Ziamora growing up in Harlem, and she joins her school's slam poetry club, and The Black Flamingo is following Michael as he's figuring out his sexuality, and he starts to do drag and gets involved in that community, and they are both just absolutely beautiful stories. And in Muted, we are following 3 girls as they're trying to make it in the music industry, and this famous artist takes them under their wing, and it absolutely gutted me. I sobbed. It's one of like only 4 books that has made me absolutely sob. And I'm really mad because this book only has like 1,800 ratings, and it's a YA book written in verse. It honestly would take you no time to read. It's so beautiful. The payoff is absolutely amazing. It just gutted me. If you like to cry, just pick up this book. Like, the payoff is amazing. I don't know why more people don't read it, and you should read it. Okay, I'm actually really proud of this next comparison because one is a memoir and one is a literary fiction / horror. And that is, if you liked In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado, I think you might like A Dowry of Blood by S.T. Gibson. So in this one, Carmen Maria Machado is detailing an abusive queer relationship. And in A Dowry of Blood, it's not exclusively said, but it's a letter written to Dracula from one of his brides after she kills him. And so both of these have absolutely beautiful lyrical writing, and they're both written in a unique format. So this one is a memoir, but it doesn't feel like a memoir. So this is part of the reason why I feel like this comparison works so well, is because both of these kind of subvert their genre, I'd say, because this one is a memoir, yes, but it's written like in like little vignettes, and each one has kind of like a different style, I guess, to it. Like a good example I just flipped to is Dream House as Choose Your Own Adventure, Dream House as Modern Art, Dream House as Epiphany, Dream House as Legacy, Dream House as American Gothic. You get the idea. And A Dowry of Blood is written as a letter in second person. So I'd say even though they're not the same genre, they both felt very similar, because this one is a memoir that kind of feels like fiction, and A Dowry of Blood is a fiction that kind of feels like a memoir. And both of them are absolutely beautiful, and you should definitely read either of them if you haven't yet. Okay, I have another one with 3 books. So if you liked either How High We Go in the Dark by Sequoia Negamatsu or Cloud Cuckoo Land by Anthony Doerr, I think that you would like Sea of Tranquility by Emily St. John Mandel. All 3 of these are similar in the way that we're following multiple storylines that in the end connect. And where How High We Go in the Dark was a little bit more outlandish and didn't connect as much as I would have loved, and Cloud Cuckoo Land, I'd say, was a bit too long for the payoff, Sea of Tranquility balanced everything perfectly. And it's one of those books too where not every page is completely full of text. Some of the pages might only have like a couple of sentences on them, and the payoff was so good. I don't know how Emily St. John Mandel managed to weave that story so perfectly and interconnect everything the way that she did. I was just baffled by the end. It's another one of those where the payoff is just so good. Like, it won't take you very long to read it, and the payoff is so good, so you should really just read it if you haven't by now. So yeah, how do I explain all of these? So How High We Go in the Dark follows, again, multiple different storylines. It more so felt to me like an anthology, like a bunch of different short stories, and then some of the storylines end up connecting in the end. But again, I didn't love how that one connected as much as I wanted to. So the long and short of it is it's science fiction, and it's following multiple different storylines after a pandemic has taken place, and then some of them have little elements where they interconnect. And in Cloud Cuckoo Land, we're following the story of this book, and we're going as far back to like, I don't know, like the 1200s or something, and then we're going like way in the future of this girl on a spaceship. And we're basically following like the origins of this book, people finding this book, keeping it safe, making it their life's work to like restore the book or annotate the book, or I can't really remember, but basically it follows way far in the past and way forward in the future. But again, for me, I felt like Cloud Cuckoo Land was a bit too long for the payoff, and How High We Go in the Dark was a bit too weird for the payoff. Whereas Sea of Tranquility, I felt pulled it off perfectly. Okay, so for the next 2, it's a pretty obvious comparison, and that is if you liked Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid, I think you might like the final revival of Opal and Nev by Donnie Walton. Both of these books are following musicians that were together in the 60s, and then they broke up, and then in the present day timeline, we are figuring out why. So in Daisy Jones and the Six, it's written in interviews. Opal and Nev is more of a traditionally written novel, and Daisy Jones and the Six is very popular, and I feel like it felt more about the songwriting process and Daisy Jones and then the lead singer of the Six working together and their creative process and everything. Whereas in Opal and Nev, we have a black woman and a white man, and it's in the 60s, so it's during the civil rights era, and something happens at one of their concerts when one of the other bands brings out a Confederate flag. And that one just went a little bit deeper for me. Both books I absolutely loved though, and I think if you like books about musicians and bands, both would be good options. Okay, lastly, I have If You Liked Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel. I think you might like The Dreamers by Karen Thompson Walker. So in both of these books, we're following like a pandemic or a sickness that is occurring, and all of them kind of have multiple different storylines. It's not really one character throughout the whole thing, and both of them to me felt like they were more about the vibes, more about the characters, and less about the plot. In Station 11, we are following a sickness that basically wipes out like 99% of people. But we're mainly following this group of people that travel around to like the people that are left and put on Shakespeare. And we're following this doctor that right before the pandemic hit, he did CPR on this older guy, and we're following his life now after the fact. And in The Dreamers, honestly, I read this one so long ago, so I can't really remember exactly, but I think we're following like two teenagers, and the sickness in this one is everyone is just falling asleep. So we're following these teenagers kind of going along to houses, looking inside, seeing if people are asleep, and taking them to the hospital. And both Station 11 and The Dreamers, again, are more vibes heavy books and less about the plot. If you liked those two and liked the kind of dystopian vibes of them but want more of a plot, I think a good one would be Moon of the Crested Snow by Waubgeshig Rice. So in Moon of the Crested Snow, we're following people in this northern Anishinaabe community, and a blackout happens, they lose power, and then it just never comes back on, basically. And this one had more of the dystopian vibes that I kind of wanted in Station 11, but it also is beautifully written and has a lot of good social commentary as well. All right, those are all of the recommendations I have today. Hopefully I convinced you to pick up something new, and thank you for watching if you did, and see you in the next one. Bye.